It is a great honor and with a real sense of importance that we gather today to reflect on the extraordinary events that have taken place in Macedonia over the last 25 years.
Почитувани професори, студенти,
Distinguished professors, students, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed excellencies, I am grateful for the honor to deliver a lecture at the prestigious Yale University on a topic related to the past, to the present and the future. Not long ago, in Bali, Indonesia, the sixth forum of the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations was held. Its topic was unity in diversity. On that occasion, I did send the following message. While the world is talking about unity in diversity, radical extremists are united in their intention to destroy the diversity. Both the problem and the solution are neither simple nor static, but complex and dynamic, since reality itself is dynamic and more complex than it appears. If it appears simple, then people most probably do not understand the reality. In the past, but also today, people have a static perception of the world around them, on borders of religions and of the margins between the religions. Only a century ago, there were 62 independent states, and now there are 196 independent states, 193 out of which are United Nations member states. The reality is that the religious and the political map is not static, but dynamic and is constantly changing. Sometimes there is reciprocity between empires and religions. The territories of empires often correspond with the boundaries of religions, and the boundaries of religions correspond with the boundaries of empires. Now we will see a map, and we will be able to see in 90 seconds how, in the past 3,000 years, the religions have changed. These are the empires which used to be in the Mediterranean and who have influenced our territory, particularly in Macedonia. So here we can see all the empires which have today their influence on all the events in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East and in the Balkans. Throughout history, empires have created the ethnic, linguistic, cultural, religious and political mosaic of the Balkans, which today consists of 50 million people. We will see the map of the movement of the religions throughout the history. This is how the Hinduism was established, then the birth of Abraham who created the Judaism, then the birth of Buddha, the death of Jesus Christ, out of these maps we can see that both the religions, the empires and the states are constantly in dynamics. There is no static period in the humankind history when one state remains for a longer period. I will repeat that throughout the history, the empires have created the ethnic, the linguistic, the cultural, the religious and the political mosaic of the Balkans, which today consists of 50 million people, 20 linguistic groups, about 20 ethnic communities, 13 countries, 3 alphabets and 3 major religions. And the legacy of the empires is also present in the Caucasus and the Middle East as regions where the empires used to meet and melt. Today, the Balkans is still perceived as an inherently unstable region in which divisions are a rule and unity is an exception to that rule. Balkanization has become a conflict measurement unit in perceiving unstable regions in the world's security and politically wise. Despite such perceptions of the Balkans, Macedonia, as a Balkan country, has distinguished itself relatively successfully from the general negative perception. Today, I will talk about this, but to find the cause, it is necessary to consider the past, the distant past. In the Balkans, geography creates history, as there are many deep rivers, high mountains, and isolated areas and lowlands. Macedonia is a typical example of this. As a crossroads of civilizations and religions for centuries, this region was conquered, divided, and invaded by the empires. Via Ignatia and Via Militaris were passing through Macedonia for centuries, which today correspond to Corridor 8 and Corridor 10. Geography influenced the creation of Macedonian history. But there were times when personalities from Macedonian history created geography. Alexander the Great opened the space, linked the peoples, and opened the corridors that later connected to the Silk Road. The geography that created these crossroads and the history that opened and connected this space created conditions for a rich religious experience. In the Neolithic period, dominated by the matriarchate, the cult of the Great Mother was present. Ever since, the woman in Macedonia receives particular respect, whereas in Rome and in the Greek polis, women were considered second-class citizens. In ancient Macedonia, women had the right to property and inheritance. In early Christianity, there is a pronounced respect for Virgin Mary. The Republic of Macedonia was among the first countries in Europe to introduce a quota guaranteeing that every consecutive third position in the electoral list shall be reserved for a woman candidate. The Iron Age brought the patriarchate and the cult of the sun Helios. Today, the Republic of Macedonia is the only sovereign state in the world that has the sun in all 3 symbols of statehood: the flag, the coat of arms, and the anthem. In the early and late antiquity, the sun god took on the tributes of Zeus Hephaestus, and after the Roman occupation of Macedonia, Zeus became the Roman Jupiter, the supreme god of the pagan pantheon. The synagogues found, like the one in Stobi, witnessed the presence of a monotheistic religion in Macedonia before Christianity. One would say many cults, beliefs and religions in one and the same place. Maybe there is an explanation for that. In his 1944 address to the Socratic Club at Oxford, Lewis made a point that even the great pagan myths reflect certain segments of the theme of cycle of incarnation, death and rebirth. According to him, some of the pagan myths are a reflection of Christianity. In fact, they announce the Christian God. We all know the famous Bible verses in the New Testament. Acts of Apostles 16:9. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready at once to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. In the period between the years 49 and 57 AD, Apostle Paul visited Macedonia 3 times and founded the first Christian communities in Europe. Through Macedonia, Christianity came to Europe. Nevertheless, Paul was not alone. In several occasions, he was accompanied by Luke, Timothy, Silas, and Tychicus. In Macedonia, Apostle Andrew the first called preached, whose aide, Urban, one of the 70 apostles, is believed to have been appointed the first bishop of Macedonia. The word was also spread by the Thessalonians Aristarchus and Secundus, the Philippian Epaphroditus, and Guy of Dibur. The seed planted in Macedonia by the apostles gave rich fruit. Some people accepted Christianity and thus experienced the disapproval of the Roman rule. This is illustrated in the Zrza monastery catacombs, where the early Christians used to hide until the 4th century. This is how these catacombs look like today. It is this persecuted Christianity that at one point changed the reality of the ancient Roman world. After the period of 3th-century anti-Christian persecution, in the period of Constantine the great metamorphosis of the Roman rule started. The strength of the Roman Christianity gradually, bottom-up, managed to break the mold of the Roman pagan society. Christianity gradually transformed the Pontifex Maximum system into the Christian system of symphony of the Church and the State. The metamorphosis of the Roman rule ended with Justinian Primus, when the new Romanian Empire was born out of the shell of the old Roman Empire, which later became known as Byzantium. This was possible because of 2 important changes. First, the old pagan wisdom was replaced by the holy wisdom, St. Sophia. Justinian put the philosophy in service of the Church, which in turn was in service of the Emperor. Second, the symphony of the powers is fully formed. Justinian Primus developed the theory of symphony in Novel 6 from 535, which states, "The priesthood and the empire are the 2 greatest gifts which God, in His infinite clemency, has bestowed upon mortals. The former has reference to divine matters, the latter presides over and directs human affairs, and both, proceeding from the same principle, adorn the life of mankind." The symbolic expression of symphony is featured on the Byzantine coat of arms, double-headed eagle. One of the heads of the eagle expresses the emperor's secular authority, and the second one, the patriarch's religious authority. The church and the state are together, representing a single body with 2 heads over which there is 1 crown. People are faithful to God through their obedience to the emperor, who is crowned by the Patriarch. Symphony is present at all levels of the Byzantine Empire. The Emperor and the Patriarch are at the top. Below are the king and the archbishop. Within their dioceses, there were principalities and bishoprics headed by princes and bishops. Serfs and priests were at the bottom. Byzantium adopted symphony of the two powers out of practical reasons. Out of the unity of these two powers, it drew the strength to defend itself against external attacks and internal heresies. On one hand, it needed to become a powerful empire, and on the other, to further develop Christianity as a religious law of all its subjects, thus maintaining inner unity. Therefore, the Byzantine Empire was monarchical and Christian. The monarch was a Christian who faithfully served the church, while the church in turn helped him maintain the territorial integrity of the empire by spreading the same faith as a cohesive core. With the rise of Byzantium, the church is in symphony with the state. The global importance of the Byzantine Empire must not be underestimated. As a successor to the Roman Empire, Byzantium considered itself the only legitimate empire in the world and wanted to rule all the countries that once belonged to the Roman Empire. The European civilization, as we know it today, would not have existed if it were not for the Byzantium. During its 1,123 years of existence, Byzantium created a rule of law and a legal system and the first modern university. Byzantium shaped the modern principles, rules and codes of conduct in diplomacy. Byzantium created the most stable financial system in history, which remained virtually unchanged for more than 1,000 years. Byzantium art and architecture had no equals. However, with the weakening of the central government, Byzantium weakened too. Unable to recover from the Fourth Crusade, the devastated and lonely Byzantium failed to resist the Ottomans, who brought in the Islam. With the fall of Constantinople in 1453, Byzantium fell as well. The fall of Byzantium meant the rise of the Ottoman Empire and Islam. As Christianity changed the reality of the ancient Roman world with Constantine, Islam changed the reality of the Middle Ages in our region with the fall of Constantinople. If we compare the map of the Byzantine Empire of the 11th century, before the Crusades, with the map of the Ottoman Empire of the 15th century, after the conquest of Constantinople, Mistra and Trebizond, we will see that both empires stretched on almost the same areas. Balkans and Asia Minor, both empires span on two continents, being the link between East and West, between Asia and Europe. However, there is one important difference. The Byzantine Empire was a Christian state, leaving no room for other religions. Unlike the efforts of the Emperor Heraclius in the 7th century to forcibly baptize Jews on the territory of the Byzantine Empire, Bayezid II allowed the exiled Sephardic Jews to settle in the Ottoman Empire, mostly in Macedonia. In Byzantium, all the different interpretations of Christianity were treated as heretical, and people were persecuted as bogomils, deriving later the Cathars, Patharans, Albizans. As a result of the unwillingness of Byzantium to introduce a more pluralistic religious society, Oriental Christian communities, such as the Nestorians and the Monophysites, remained separated from the Christianity of the 7 ecumenical councils for centuries. And indeed, the result of that separation can be seen to this day. Namely, most of the persecuted Christians in Iraq and in Syria have the same background. By conquering Byzantium, the Ottoman Empire acquired a large Christian population. In such conditions, Mehmed the Conqueror was aware of the complexity and the structure of the social religion of the Balkans. He did not want to be identified with any of the specific groups, but be outside of the groups so as not to become a prisoner to any of them. He achieved that with the millet system, so as to neutralize the existing differences by creating balance. According to Alfred Carlton, the millet system is a provision for the government of subject minorities whose religious faith differs from that of the governing institution of the state and who are therefore limited in their citizenship by virtue of the fact that the laws of personal statute are based upon religious sanctions. In the Ottoman regime, the word millet was used for religious communities, denoting religious categorization and identification. Although there is evidence of the millet system even 1,500 years before Christ, it however became best known during the Ottoman Empire, which did not know of the modern concept of nation. Similar to Byzantium, the overall organization of the society was based on religion. The Ottoman state classified its subjects according to their religious identities. Basic elements were the millets, which implied affiliation to a particular religion. It was a regime that provided autonomy to the non-Muslim communities and an opportunity to be governed by their religious leaders called Millet Bashi. The Sultan was at the same time Caliph, whose judgments were based on the Islamic law of Sharia, which applied only to Muslims. Because of this, the other religions enjoyed full autonomy in resolving civil disputes in accordance with their canonic law. Hence, non-Muslim communities were autonomous or semi-autonomous. The millet had no specific territory. The members of the millet freely moved throughout the empire, but remained members of their own religious community, which protected their rights. This is an individual exercise of a collective right, namely the right to a personal union. This explains precisely the fact why the ethno-linguistic and religious maps of the former Ottoman Southeastern Europe are so colorful and complex. Both Byzantium and the Ottoman Empire are theocracies in a way. During Byzantine time, the church was in symphony with the state. At the time of the Ottoman Empire, the caliphate was in symphony with the sultanate, while the other non-Muslim millets were part of the state, they were subordinated to. With the rise of the Ottoman Empire, the symphony multiplied. Unlike the Byzantine symphony between one state and one church, the Ottoman kind was symphony between one state, the so-called devlet, and multiple religions known as millets. In almost 5 centuries, between 1456 and the collapse of the empire during World War I, the number of millets was constantly increasing. First, 3 non-Muslim religions received official recognition as self-governing communities: the Christian Orthodox Church, the Armenian Orthodox Church, and the Jews. In the 17th and in the 18th century, the Roman Catholic millet emerged under French patronage, and the Protestant millet under the patronage of England and the Netherlands. According to some, by the end of the Ottoman Empire, there were already 14 millets. The most important was the Orthodox millet, also called Rum millet. As I said, most important was the Rum millet. The name Rum millet, later known as Rumelia, referred to the East Roman or Byzantine imperial origin of that millet. Leader of the Rum millet was the Patriarch of Constantinople, who was accountable to the Islamic leaders for the stability and loyalty of the Orthodox Christians. Until the 19th century, this relatively stable system provided for the respect of group differences. For almost half a millennium, the Ottomans ruled the empire, diverse as every other empire in history. This illiberal society that did not recognize the concept of individual freedom provided relative peace, security and collective rights, but not at the expense of the other communities. Muslims, Christians and Jews were able to practice their religion side by side, enriching their specific cultures. In the 19th century, when the three religions within the Ottoman empires had mutual respect, the rest of Europe was facing the 30-year religious war between Catholics and Protestants that ended up killing 8 million people. Therefore, the 16th and the 17th century are declared periods of peace in the Balkans, the so-called Pax Ottomana. And now the big question arises: how did the Balkans, from a region of peace, turned into a region of wars? How did the Balkans become reduced to a powder keg and a threat to the peace in Europe? As said before, the transition from Rome to Byzantium, from Pontifex Maximus to symphony of church and state, was a process of metamorphosis. The shift of the millet into devlet is pseudomorphosis. In mineralogy, pseudomorphosis implies that one mineral creates the form, while the other mineral fills the space created by the first one. In other words, same form but different content. The millet provided the form and the space, while the devlet filled the form in, filled the space with different content. The pre-modern millet system became the safe haven of modern nation-states. With the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the millet became devlet, thus the religion, the church, became state. What does this mean? Unlike in the West, where the state creates a nation, in the Balkans, the nation which derives from the religion or from the millet creates a state. The transformation of millets into devlets was followed by two mutually contradictory processes. Guided by imperialism, Balkan nation elites began to develop projects aimed at inclusion of greater territories inhabited by members of their respective former millets into the new states. That is how the projects for great states appeared in the Balkans. However, by including territories, they excluded communities that were not part of the millet that later transformed into a devlet. The devlet, as a state, tried to establish a new symphony of one religion, one language, one nation. Although all Balkan countries inherited multi-ethnic, multi-religious and multilingual societies. All the more, all possible means were exploited in achieving new homogeneity at the expense of the inherited religious and ethno-linguistic heterogeneity of the entire Balkans in all new states. By including new territories, they excluded the diverse communities. Some were assimilated and others were mutually exchanged or expelled. Many migrated to the New World, to the United States, where everyone is allowed to be what he or she is. Here, this document, dating from the late 19th century, which was published in the Political Economist journal, you can see all peoples from the Macedonia, from the Balkans that have come to the United States. While they were not recognized in their native countries, it was the United States that gave them the possibility of self-identification. You can see that the Macedonians came to the States from the Turkish Empire, from Macedonia, from Bulgaria. But in the new countries, Macedonians were not allowed to self-identify themselves. And the consequences Almost all millets in the Balkans became Balkan devlets. Yet, unlike the millet, which includes the devlet, or the nation-state excludes. The consequences are well known. The first and the last armed conflicts in the 20th century in Europe happened in the Balkans, as the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913 were a bloody prelude to the World War I. The armed conflicts in former Yugoslavia in the 1990s meant a bloody finale of the Cold War. Yugoslavia inherited its cultural autonomy from Austria-Hungary and religious autonomy from the Ottoman Empire. The conflicts in Yugoslavia were fought for the creation of new homogeneity of the heterogeneous territories. And yet, there is an exception to the rule. At the beginning of the end of Yugoslavia, there were two republics in which the millets did not turn into devlets, as the religious communities therein did not transform into nation-states. The first one is Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the second one is Macedonia. At the end of the process, however, only Macedonia remained. There was no pseudomorphosis of the millet into devlet in the case of Macedonia. The religion did not become a state. The tradition of the millet system still exists as a Macedonian model of coexistence. What is the secret of success of the Macedonian model? Professor Miroslav Wolf might say that the secret is in the balance between belonging and distancing of identities. And I agree with him. Distancing without belonging, as well as belonging without distancing, have a similar result: integration with assimilation. In the first case, the denial of the other's identity and its assimilation, and in the second case, renunciation of self-identity and assimilation into someone else's identity. Tolerance is always seen in our attitude towards the others. There is no tolerance if there is no other, nor the identity is complete without the other's identity. One belongs to a particular ethnic, religious, linguistic, and cultural matrix. The Macedonian ethnic, religious, and linguistic mosaic includes the ethno-linguistic identities of Macedonians, Albanians, Roma, Turks, Serbs, Vlachs, Bosniaks, and religious identities of Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Each person belongs to his or her own matrix while being distanced from the other's matrices. Tolerance is possible only when there is balance between belonging and distancing. Unlike in the West, where the concept of tolerance was developed after the religious wars, in Macedonia we tend to apply something that is more than tolerance of diversity, and that is acceptance and respect of diversity. The Macedonian model of coexistence in its core implies, as Professor Wolf puts in, creating a space in us to accept the other without having to melt him or without having to be melted into someone else's identity. In the core of the Macedonian model is the notion that other cultures and religions are not a threat to someone's identity, but a potential source of its enrichment. The Macedonian model is the model of integration without assimilation, based on respect for diversity. This was possible because of the open space, which created open minds, open-minded people who accepted the social complexity inherent from the empires. Life has taught us to cohabitation, mutual understanding and assistance. The most illustrative example of this is the metaphor of the so-called komši kapidžik. Namely, in the past, every house in Macedonia was separated from the neighboring house with a wall that had a small door called kapidžik. These small doors often existed between households of different religions. It is known from ancient times that even when the main door was closed, the small door always remained open for dialogue, exchange and assistance. A door that even in challenging times was not supposed to be closed. Komši kapidžik is the traditional Macedonian logic of coexistence. Let me give you a personal example. In Macedonia, a country in the midst of the Silk Road, silk has been produced since ancient times. Almost every house in my native town of Valandovo had a garden planted with mulberries whose leaves are food of the silkworm. Almost every household was involved in breeding silkworms. My mother worked in the silk factory, and I remember well the whole production process, in which I often participated. The crucial moment is when the silkworm is wrapped up with the hull in which it is to experience a metamorphosis and turn into a butterfly. But if it takes too long, the hull would then turn yellow and the moment of creation of silk would irreversibly be missed. It often happened that the short period of time before metamorphosis would overlap with the celebration of Easter when the Orthodox Christians are at rest, fasting and praying. It was in those days when our Muslim neighbors would come over and remove the hulls instead of us and take them to the silk factory where silk was being processed. The Christians had the opportunity to pay back their Muslim neighbors during the Ramadan fast by herding the cattle and doing other urgent matters. This is an example of functional coexistence. Macedonia still nurtures indeed a tradition of inter-religious coexistence. Other illustrative examples are the multi-religious buildings which are typical for Macedonia. The monastery Sveta Bogorodica Prečista is the spiritual center of the town of Kičevo. Both Orthodox Christians and Sunni Muslims pray to God under the same roof. The monastery Sveti Nikola is also a teke and is used at the same time by Orthodox Christians and Bektashi Muslims from the town of Makedonski Brod. The monasteries St. John the Baptist, which is near the town of Dibur, and St. Naum Ohridski near the city of Ohrid, are being regularly visited by both Christians and Muslims. The Macedonian model of coexistence creates people with open minds who accept and respect diversity. People like Mother Teresa, who was born in 1910 in Skopje, Macedonia. Within no more than 100 meters from her parents' house, there was a Catholic church, Orthodox church, a Jewish synagogue, and a Muslim mosque. Mother Teresa has become synonymous with a person who lives the unity in diversity. Coexistence is evident in the struggle of the Macedonian people for freedom and independence. All appeals, calls, manifestos and declarations underline the respect for diversity. The documents of the Razlog and Kresna uprising of 1876 and 1878, the proclamation of the Provisional Government of Macedonia Unity of 1880, the Kruševo Manifesto of 1903, and the Asnom Declaration for Fundamental Rights of the Citizens of the Democratic Macedonia of 1944. The Republic of Macedonia has built and improved this experience in its inclusive democratic model of integration without assimilation, in the Macedonian model of coexistence. The views of some Balkan countries on identity are still universally affirmative or universally negative. For example, all Greeks are Orthodox, though not all Orthodox are Greeks. By contrast, Macedonia has a particularistic approach to identity. For us, it is normal that some ethnic Macedonians are Orthodox Christians, some are Muslims, some Catholics, some Protestant evangelical evangelical Christians. Unlike in most other Balkan countries, the ethnic identity in Macedonia does not depend on religion. Macedonia is a microcosm in which all millets survived, never turning into devlets. It is exactly the Macedonian model of coexistence that enabled a Protestant to be elected president of the predominantly Orthodox Republic of Macedonia. In the 1999 presidential elections, Orthodox, Catholic and evangelical Christians, but also Muslims and Jews voted for Boris Trajkovski. This is unimaginable still for many Balkan countries. Macedonia faced and still faces its own challenges. The division in the Macedonian society is not on religious but on ethnic grounds. This led to the 2001 conflict, which was resolved with the Ohrid Framework Agreement, which became part of the constitution. But like every real democracy, it is a process, not a finished project. The Republic of Macedonia pays great attention and makes efforts to implement the constitutional and legal provisions relating to all aspects of minority rights, guaranteeing the status of second official language to the language spoken by at least 20% of the citizens, equitable representation of ethnic communities in public institutions, the status of religious communities, guaranteeing recognition, protection and development of the identity of the communities, ensuring special parliamentary procedures on issues of special importance to the ethnic communities, as well as decentralization of power. We upgrade and improve on a daily basis our common model, which implies exercise of rights, but also respect and sharing obligations and responsibilities arising from the constitutional order. Macedonia does not want to keep this model selfishly for itself, but to share it wholeheartedly with the world. This is especially important today. The Republic of Macedonia is committed to the intercultural and interreligious dialogue. In 2003, we initiated the first forum of the dialogue among civilizations, held in Ohrid under the leadership of former President Trajkovski. The Ohrid message echoes and is relevant even today. We, the participants of the Ohrid Regional Forum on Dialogue Among Civilizations, are committed to a culture of dialogue, tolerance and peace in promoting prosperity, well-being and mutual cooperation among the peoples and countries in the region of Southeast Europe. The dialogue among civilizations, both chronologically and in essence, predated the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, which was formed in 2005 at the initiative of the governments of Spain and Turkey. Namely, only through dialogue can we come to a union, to an alliance of civilizations. The paradigm of the dialogue among civilizations and the alliance of civilization is a direct response to the paradigm of the clash of civilizations. Macedonia provided its contribution in this field. I said earlier that both the problem and the solution are neither simple nor static, but dynamic and complex. Because reality is dynamic and more complex than it appears. Macedonia is a product of that dynamics and refuses to be placed in a static framework. And because of that, it can offer solutions. In just 1 century, 134 new states emerged. There are about 9,800 ethnic groups and about 7,000 languages in the world today. There are 19 major world religions, divided into 270 large and very small religious groups and communities. A natural tendency for each community is to be self-sufficient. If we have a dynamic view of diversity, then every ethno-linguistic or religious group would be an embryo of a new state, namely each millet would like to become a devlet, then there would be over 9,000 countries in the world, and that is a recipe for permanent conflicts. Sometimes the open space of the empire enabled extraterritoriality of the millet and personal union of believers. Today, again, the open cyberspace of the internet enables a revival of the millet, which is again extraterritorial and virtually complete and united. All believers are together in an extraterritorial virtual millet again. Is this the case today with the caliphate? The millet is a result of extraterritoriality and it functions in an open space. The devlet is a result of territoriality and it functions in a closed space. The difference of the open and the closed space is in the communication and integration. I often say that whoever communicates integrates, and whoever does not communicate becomes ghettoized and makes up enemies. We have known of such processes in the Balkans. However, perhaps the extreme of this process is ISIS. It brings back the worst of the pre-Westphalian order. It brings forth the concept of foe, a foe that must disappear and be gone forever. If the challenge is pre-Westphalian, the answer should also be pre-Westphalian, millet system, integration without assimilation, respect for diversity, are pre-Westphalian models and practices the modern democracy might learn from. The state faces challenges that can only be addressed by the society. The society can indeed learn from the practices of the millet. For some countries in the Balkans, in Europe, the Macedonian democratic model of coexistence may still be a challenge. But one thing is clear. Our model, based on the positive experiences of the past, is also the model of the future. If in the past we could live and make progress together, we can and we must try to achieve it in the future. Macedonia does not want to be only a mirror that reflects, but a source of light that illuminates. Thank you.
The first question is actually this. Many states or millets which became devlets existed within the Balkans, but only Macedonia appears to have preserved the millet system, that is, Croatia, Serbia, Kosovo devolved into the devlets. What enabled Macedonia to preserve the millet system without becoming the devlet model?
Macedonia never used the model of integration with assimilation. We always use the model of integration without assimilation. In our tradition, we never practice tolerance. We always practice respect. Respect is highest philosophy of tolerance. And in our tradition, respect creates inclusive model of democracy. All diversity to be included in the public life, in institution, in parliament. This is our case, our Macedonian specific model. We never assimilate diversity. We never homogenize complex heritage of the period of empire and open space. Period of open space.
Okay. This is from a from a current student here at the Divinity School. Memory can be a powerful tool to perpetuate violence or cause divisions among ethnic groups. I believe that economic instability or inequality can lead groups to deeper divisions between ethnic groups. What are your thoughts on the ways in which memory may be used or has been used to perpetuate violence in Macedonia? What are the ways that economic policies may be used to unite ethnic groups and the country?
Со распадот на Југославија
With the breakup of Yugoslavia,
се изгуби единствениот пазар.
we lost the single market.
Нашата економија во Македонија беше
Our economy in Macedonia was
за големиот
adapted to the large Yugoslav market of 22 million people. And as Yugoslavia collapsed, the companies which were producing products for a large market have collapsed as well. So we were exporting to Russia, to the Eastern Bloc, and with the demise of the Eastern Bloc and system, our entire industry in Macedonia has collapsed as well. So the economy, or the lack of economy, actually made quite a large amount of poverty in our states, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania as well. So those states which adapted and didn't have problems in joining the EU and NATO didn't have these problems to adapt its society to the capitalistic economic model. We, in our transition, have been blocked by our southern neighbor, by Greece, because of our name, the name of our country. So Macedonia was, in a way, forced to manage by itself on how to live through this transition. And although we are NATO candidates for so long, and our soldiers have been participating in Iraq and in Afghanistan, we had 19 rotations in Afghanistan. We have 150 soldiers in Kabul, 10 rotations in Iraq. But because of our name issue, or precisely the problem that Greece has with our name, which doesn't allow for us to be Macedonians and to be called Macedonia, that's why we are outside of NATO and the European Union. So that's why we had to find ways how to live through this period. And I can happily say that Macedonia today has the fastest growing rate of GDP in our entire region. Now, it is planned and projected at 3.7% this year. New jobs are being created because young people today cannot wait for years and years that their problems be resolved, problems which are made by others. And that's why the economic success contributes that the youth stay in Macedonia, that they don't leave Macedonia, and that being engaged. Also, creative individuals in Macedonia which live in Macedonia work for abroad. A company called FX3X is making digital animation. And on the past Oscars, 4 of the nominees were clients of this company. Our musicians produce online music for the Hollywood and European studios. So young people have better managed to integrate in this global world, because this global world is unterritorial. If you're powerful or you're creative, you can easily find a market for your digital products. So young people are participating in this global competition. We have a problem with the generations which were used to live in a different system, in the socialist system, in which the state was finding education and they're taking care of your life in general. So in a way, this is a problem in many post-communist countries. Although they are NATO member states, generations still adapt to the new way of life in which they would have to create their own life with their own mind and with their own hands. Economy in Macedonia contributes to the fact that all ethnic communities live and collaborate together. We have a specific multi-ethnic democracy. Multi-ethnic democracy includes that languages of the minority communities are also in official use, and education is on mother language, and universities as well. So, for example, the Albanian community is more than 20% in Macedonia. According to a constitution, it enjoys the rights of the community over 20%, meaning universities, media, NGOs. And the same is with those communities which are over 20% of the population. On a local level, they enjoy these rights. So Macedonia is the only country in the world which has a Roma mayor, and Roma language as an official language of the municipality, and an official gazette in Roma language, schools in Roma language, primary and secondary, media also. So if in any municipality you have over 20% of population from a certain community, the language of this community is also in official use in this municipality. So if you have over 20% of Turkish ethnic citizens, they enjoy the schools, and they can talk or write on their own language when addressing the institutions. They have their own media. So this is a complex democracy which needs a strong economy, so that the economy provides for the good functioning of the state and the obligation that the state has towards its citizens, or the right to education, which is a state obligation. So economy is a prerequisite that this multi-ethnic model exists and continues to exist. Multi-ethnic and multilinguistic model. So this is Macedonia, and we hope that we are a positive example, and as Macedonia goes forward, we know that people will enjoy their rights, but also the state will service the obligations that it has towards its citizens.
Thank you very much. There are two different follow-up questions that come from this, so let me pose this one first. What is being done in Macedonia to instill peace and justice in early childhood education and beyond? So you've just talked about the economy and about the languages, but this is a question about the earliest levels of education.
Not often it is being said that the character of the human being is being formed before the human being enters primary education. So the tradition of respect towards the others, the tradition of accepting others, the tradition of collaborating with others is what is learned in the family. This is domestic education. Tolerance is what you learn at school, but respect you should learn at home. Because first you have to respect yourself so that you could respect others. The human being needs to know that the human being is in a sphere where it's surrounded by different ethnic, religious, and linguistic groups. Our education system is contributing to that. But very important emphasis is put on parents and families until 6 or 7 years of age. Because when you go to school, the school is teaching you what is a standard, what is a principle, what is a norm. But the natural law of respecting nature, for example, and nature as life is too complex, so we should respect natural law. Of course, the sun always rises on the east. There's a day and a night. There's male and female. there's a lot of diversity in flora and fauna. This is what you learn in childhood. And that's why I have emphasized the matriarchate, which was very present at our region. The mother teaching her child about life in a complex surrounding, multi-ethnic, multilinguistic surrounding. So if in this surrounding you communicate, you are integrated. If you do not communicate, you are ghettoized. If you live in a ghetto, you always have enemies and people that don't understand you, and this is a basis for conflict. We have certain conditions like this in our country when people come from different regions and they don't understand the Macedonian tradition of respect of diversity, and they encounter problems. But always the tradition of respect, not of tolerance, but of respect, is the primary force. Because you tolerate a bad taste or bad human being, but the respect is a much more elevated philosophy of accepting and respecting others. That's what our entire tradition is based on. I told you about Mother Teresa. If she was born on another spot, Mother Teresa would not have her role in life that she had. In 100 meters of her house, she learned about all the religions in this world. And she respected them. And her entire life, her entire philosophy is respect, to respect the others, the poor, the helpless, not to tolerate them, to respect them. That is what is coming as our tradition. You cannot learn this from the books. You learn this from the street. When you see a child from another religion or another language, and you see a person who is from a different ethnic background, that is the inclusion. To include in yourself the diversity and respect it, not to tolerate it, to respect it.
Thank you. The other question, which is related to that first question, or the second question posed, was touched on in your response when you mentioned the relationship to Greece. And this is a sensitive matter, but since Greece has blocked your entrance to the EU, or at least impeded your entrance into the EU, can you give us an idea of your relationship to Greece, the dispute over the name Macedonia, and how you hope to proceed from where you're positioned today?
Today, when someone hears about Macedonia and Greece, they might think that we are completely isolated between each other. On the contrary, today the relations between Macedonia and Greece are the best in the history of our two countries. The largest number of Macedonians spend their holidays in Greece. In Macedonia, there are over 200 very successful Greek companies. So the relations between ordinary citizens are extraordinary. Because of the crisis in Greece, many Greek citizens come to Macedonia to buy food, to get services, which are much cheaper in Macedonia. But the result between Macedonia and Greece is the result of the political elites of the past. We cannot change the past. But if we influence the present time and the youth, we can change their past. That's why we want that young people collaborate and communicate. And that's what we have on the ground. Greece had a different tradition. When Greece became a state in the 19th century, it assimilated all others and introduced the Byzantine model of state and church in Symphonia. But today, with internet, the global media, there is a strong ethnic revival, a religious revival as well. And many people which were assimilated now search for their rights. And this is the same with the Macedonians living in Greece. So it's a very complex question. You cannot understand it in a short time, but the essence is that there are different worlds in the perspective of people. Greece is a state of one nation, one language, one religion. Macedonia respects every religion, language, and identity. So it's a conflict of a sphere of identity. That is why the answers to these questions are so tough. Identity is a feeling that comes from you and is related to others. So if others don't recognize you, it's their problem, it's not your problem. We are Macedonians speaking Macedonian and living in the Republic of Macedonia. Greece doesn't want to respect this, doesn't want to accept that there are Macedonians talking in Macedonian language and living in Macedonia. That is the problem of Greece. Recognition, or to be precise, non-recognition by the Greek elite, the elite in Greek society. Because on the entire Balkans, the elites changed and new elites came. But in Greece, we still have the elite from the Cold War, when the different circumstances were in place. So now, unfortunately, still some elites in Greece still use that rhetoric, while the population itself has a different perspective. So in the United Nations, we have talks on the name issue, being the only member state which is negated the right to name itself. Our name, constitutional name, Republic of Macedonia, and its usage is contested in the UN, EU, and NATO. Also, we are the only candidate for NATO, which cannot become a NATO member state if it doesn't change its name. Imagine this in the 21st century. The same is with the European Union. For several years we are a candidate country, 5 years we are getting recommendations for start of accession negotiations, but Greece is putting a veto. It doesn't allow us to enter, and veto is a rule in NATO and EU, and Greece does not give its consent for us to become a NATO and EU member state because of our name and because of our identity. We had a case at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, because in 1995, with the help of the American administration, we had a bilateral agreement with Greece called an interim accord, which Greece obliged not to block Macedonia in international organizations if we use the acronym Former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Greece, at the Bucharest summit in NATO, although they had the legal obligation not to block us, they blocked us. We raised the case at the International Court of Justice, and the International Court of Justice brought a unanimous decision without the ad hoc Greek judge, of course. Every other member state voted that Macedonia has the right to be a member of EU and NATO according to the interim accord. So we have a judgment in our favor, but unfortunately no one is respecting this judgment today. Even the Secretary General of NATO said International Court of Justice judgments do not oblige NATO. So we cannot find a political solution. We have a legal solution and the right to one's own identity and name, which unfortunately is not valid for Greece, who consider that they have to tell us what our name should be. and our identity should be. So we hope that in Greece there will be new elites and new politicians which will respect reality. Macedonia is a reality. We exist. That's why I speak in Macedonian language, so that you know that it exists. The Greek Prime Minister said recently that our language was invented by the communists or Tito. That's why I gave you a deep historical overview, so that you understand that there were so many traditions and empires on the Macedonian soil, but the people itself is there all the time, and that is Macedonia.
Thank you. We have time maybe for one last question, if it's not a simple question, and it's posed by two different people. And the question is, are there some minority groups that are not approved by the state yet? And the questioner referred to minor Protestant groups in Macedonia. And the other half of this question, which is similar, is the Holocaust decimated the Jewish community in Macedonia, and today there are only several hundred Jews living in Macedonia. Are there any efforts to welcome Jews back into Macedonia as a small, recognized religion?
First, from the Protestant community, they are coming in Macedonia during the Ottoman Empire as missionaries to protect the Christians which were under Ottoman rule. And our revolutionaries have even kidnapped a Protestant missionary who came to Macedonia, but she later helped the Macedonian revolutionaries, and she fundraised for them, and she helped them in arms to fight against the Ottoman authority. So although the Protestant community is small, it contributed with one of its members becoming a president of Macedonia. So Protestants in Macedonia are a constitutional category. In the Macedonian constitution you have the 5 official religions: Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, Muslims and Jews. And I, as a president, always when there is a holiday of any religious community, I visit and celebrate with them. In the Orthodox holidays, I go to the Orthodox Church, to the Catholic Church, and it's a holiday of the other communities, I go to their institutions. For Hanukkah to the Jews, for Ramadan with the Muslims. So whoever, no difference. I respect the religion of all others, and I go to them and I give them the respect that they deserve. Jews in Macedonia have come from Spain and Portugal in 1492. In the same year Columbus discovered America. The Inquisition expels all the Jews from Spain, and most of them come to Macedonia, then part of the Ottoman Empire. This is a period of open space without borders. But when the Ottoman Empire dissolves, the area of Macedonia is divided between Serbia, Greece and Bulgaria. Today, the Serbian part of Macedonia is the independent Republic of Macedonia. The other two parts are not recognized by Greece or Bulgaria. Today in Greece we still have Macedonians which are not recognized as Macedonians in Greece. Many of them were expelled in the civil war in Greece after the Second World War, when the Macedonians stood on the side of the left, because it was a left-right conflict. Macedonians supported the left side, and they were expelled after their defeat. And many socialist countries at that time accepted these people. And these Macedonians, many of them live in the United States and in Canada. Imagine they are today US citizens. But when they go to their birthplace, to their village, to the house where they were born, they are not allowed to enter. because in their passport they have the name of the place where they were born with Macedonian names. So instead of Thessaloniki, it says Solun, which is the name in which the city in which they were born. So although they have an American or a Canadian passport, they still cannot enter and visit their birthplace. In the Second World War, Macedonia was occupied by Bulgaria, who was an ally of Hitler. Bulgarian authorities acquitted all put all 7,200 Jews in a camp and then sent them to a Treblinka concentration camp in which 97% of the Jews were executed. The left 3% were either with the partisans or they were hidden by the Macedonian neighbors. But the Macedonian government, when the property of Yugoslavia was privatized again, created a fund in which they invested all the property of Jews of Macedonia. Because they didn't have inheritance. So from this fund they built the fund of Holocaust in Macedonia. They built a museum of Holocaust in Macedonia. So Macedonia is one of the 4 countries in the world where there is a center of the Holocaust, where the whole history of the Jewish community, which was living from 1492 until 1943 in Macedonia. One of the 4 centers in the world. So, whoever visits Macedonia should visit this center in Skopje and witness the Jewish history that was destroyed by Bulgarian fascists and Greek Nazis and German Nazis. So, many families still keep the documents and traditional outfits and the excavations which we have in Macedonia, places with a lot of artifacts. In Macedonia we discovered a synagogue from the 3rd century after Christ. So the tradition of Jewish life is persistent in Macedonia. One of the biggest Macedonian revolutionaries, who was member of the Ottoman parliament, Dimitar Vlahov, was the first to open the question that Jews should have their own national state. David Ben-Gurion, who was the founder of Israel, was together with him, with Dimitar Vlahov, a member of the parliament. And that's why after the death of Dimitar Vlahov, a street named after him is existing in Jerusalem. So the relations between Macedonia and Israel were ones of respect and cooperation, and that is why the world Jewish community supported the project of Macedonia to build a center of Holocaust in Macedonia as a positive example for other countries in which the Jews have been expelled and their property was confiscated.
But thank you very much, President Ivanov.